Join me today as we talk about when realism and fiction collide. This will be part 3, where we talk about ways to kind of make it work, at least in the realm of comic books. This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bobbie, and today we're going to be talking about another when reality and fiction collide. And like I said, today we're going to be talking a little bit about how it can actually kind of work in comic books. Now, in my past video, in part 2, I talked specifically about the X-Men, but there's plenty of other instances where, greater instances, where the creators of various comics decide that they want to tackle some kind of issue. And to be clear, I'm not saying that they're bad writers or anything for trying to do this. You know, they've got interests, they've got, things they want to say, and they think they have the means to say it. It's just that they don't think through the interactions that they're going to create. Again, like I said in the last video, I talked about the Mutant Registration Act and the fact that so many X-Men villains are specifically targeting them because they're mutants. It's not a matter of, oh, we're going to do X, the X-Men I probably should use a different variable there. The X-Men are going to be in our way, so let's preemptively take them out. No, it's like, no, kill those damn dirty muties is basically their sentiment. And that's wildly different from Dr. Octopus being like, well, Spider-Man might get in my way, I should take him out first. This would be like if he was death to all arachnids or something. And it's just unprecedented in the rest of Marvel. So, but there again, I don't feel like that goes too far. It does raise questions whenever they interact with the rest of the Marvel universe. That's why some people think they should just be spun off into their own universe, and the movie should treat them as their own universe. But it's not going to happen. So, what if you're a comic creator and you know the pitfalls of trying to do this? What options do you have? Well, unless you're going to make your own book, your two best options are, number one, create an alternate timeline, alternate universe, what have you. This allows you to use the same characters, which presumably is what you want to do, but you clearly establish that it's not the mainline universe, and so the rules of the road could be different there. And there's numerous alternate universes for Marvel and DC. Like in DC, they fall under the Elseworlds titles, and in Marvel, they're either in the What If series, or they're larger ones like the Age of Apocalypse, where it's its own expansive universe. And it allows you to explore other ideas that would just simply throw the mainline universe into total chaos or just wouldn't make sense. So let's take the Age of Apocalypse, for instance. One of the stories from the classic Claremont era is the Days of Future Past. And in the Days of Future Past, in the future, the Sentinels rule the United States. Now, the Sentinels are giant mutant hunting robots. But by that point, some of them have become self-aware, and they've conquered the United States. And they have, the few mutants that are left that they know of are in camps. They've killed most of the others, and they've killed the other superhumans too. So, in that universe, the evil side of humanity has won, or essentially won. I mean, there's follow-up issues where eventually the mutants do win, but for the most part, that's the ugly side of humanity wins. So then you have, fast forward to the 90s, and you have the Age of Apocalypse. Well, the Age of Apocalypse is kind of like a dark mirror to that. It's like, well, what if the mutants win, but not the good ones? What if the mutant supremacists win, like Apocalypse, who now rules North America? and has wiped out most of the humans in North America, so that it's primarily mutants now. And in Europe, they have their army of sentinels, and the two sides are gearing up to engage in some kind of all-out war against each other. With the people in Europe not understanding that that's Apocalypse's ultimate goal. Of course, the mutants don't understand that either. He does, but the others don't. But that's deeper story stuff. The point is, it was an alternate universe that allowed them to explore the concept of, well, all this time they've been worrying about humans and the Sentinels taking over. Well, what if the mutants take over? Like, is that going to be rainbows and sunshine for everybody? Marvel's answer is, no, it's not. So you had this sprawling alternate universe, and for 4 months, all of the X titles converted to the Age of Apocalypse. So I think there were 8 at the time. So you had 32 issues to explore several aspects of the setting. You had an Alpha and an Omega issue for the beginning and the end, and a few like filler issues here and there for other parts. So it was, at least at the time, I think it was the most heavily explored alternate universe that existed for Marvel, and probably DC. And I think the only things that have surpassed it since, even though it's gotten more issues, so it might still be in the lead. We had the Earth X setting, which is an alternate future where everyone becomes mutants, and that was kind of like Alex Ross's like grand unifying theory of the Marvel universe, where he tried to basically explain everything and how it all ties together for one massive cohesive narrative. Excellent series, in my opinion, by the way. So you have these endeavors like this, and like I said, you have the what ifs. The what ifs are usually the one-offs, like, oh well, what if this happened? Like, what if Legion killed Magneto instead of Xavier? So the Age of Apocalypse doesn't happen, but things still don't turn out great either. Or what if during one of the big crossovers way back when, what if Wolverine, I think, took out Dracula, but in the process became the Lord of the Vampires? And you just have a lot of them are just silly things like that. But I think a few of them were probably a little more, I don't want to say adult, but a little more real. No, that's not the word. A little more serious. We'll go with that. So that's one approach. The other is, I don't want to call it parody, but that's essentially on some level what it is. And that's where you have an idea with specific characters, but to use those characters for that idea just won't work in the long term. And there are 2 examples of this that I know of. One is Alan Moore for Watchmen. The characters for Watchmen predominantly are reskins of, is it Carlton or Charlton? I think it's Carlton, comic book characters that DC gained the rights to. And once they had them, Alan Moore went with them, he was working for them at the time, had a proposal for a storyline. And they were like, well, Alan, this is a dynamite story. We'll never be able to use these characters ever again. And, we just spent money getting them. So let's not do that. And so he repurposed all the characters. Rorschach, for instance, was based on The Question. Dan Dryberg, who was Night Owl, Night Owl 2. He's based on the Blue Beetle. I want to say that Dr. Manhattan's based on Captain Atom, but I could be wrong on that one. And, so on and so on. Most of them are based on these other characters. And so Alan Moore produced a storyline, which is a singular storyline. Yeah, they've added to it here and there, but by and large, it's this one single storyline. And it had a lot of things to say, and so instead of taking these characters and making it so you'd never be able to use them again, because no one really wants to touch that storyline, because it's excellent, so you would basically lock them behind this shield forever. Instead, he created original characters that mirror these other characters. And so that was working within the same company. But then we have the Marvel example, where we go outside the company. I can't think of the gentleman's name right off the top of my head. That's going to bother me. But Marvel, this gentleman went to DC with an idea for a Justice League storyline. And they turned him down, so he went back to Marvel. And someone there remembered that Marvel had a knockoff version of the Justice League, known as the Squadron Supreme. I think it's Mark Grunwald. Now that I think that's the guy I'm trying to think of here. And so he was like, hey, can I just use the Squadron Supreme instead? And they're like, this is an excellent story. Like, we're not doing anything with him. Go for it. So instead of going to DC, he went to DC, but instead of at DC creating a knockoff of the Justice League, he went back to Marvel, who already had a knockoff of the Justice League in the form of the Squadron Supreme, and told his story there. And that's where the main Squadron Supreme storyline comes from, which is also an excellent story, by the way. And there you've got characters like Hyperion, who's their version of Superman. You have Power Princess, who's their version of Wonder Woman. Dr. Spectrum is the Green Lantern. Golden Arrow's the Green Arrow. I think it's the Wizard is the Flash. I mean, like, they're all there, plus some others that were created for the storyline. And so there you have a storyline about the Squadron deciding that in the interest of humanity, they're going to take over the world. And so they do, and they come into possession of a device that can essentially like rewrite certain aspects of people's personalities. And so they use it on prisoners to turn them into nice people. But we also see the whole power corrupts thing, where one of the squadron uses it on one of the men in the squadron uses it on one of the women to make her infatuated with him, and it becomes like near murderous obsession because he had no idea what he was doing, and also, to illustrate that it's wrong to do those kinds of things. And so most of the storyline is about them trying to fight Nighthawk, who's their version of Batman, who goes to the main Marvel universe to try to convince the Avengers to come help him fight the Squadron, and to make them realize that, like, you can't just play with people's lives like this. And it's a really good storyline. It's way ahead of its time. So that's how you can go about doing these things. Is you can take you can create essentially other versions of the characters and place them in their own reality, and where you're going to rewrite the rules, and so there the storyline can make sense. You're not having to fight decades of continuity to try to make this storyline that flies in the face of comic book logic make sense. You can set the comic book in a universe that doesn't operate on comic book logic. It just happens to be in a comic book. And, and of course, like I said, the other is the alternate universe idea, which, that's essentially what all these are anyway. But, so you have these ideas. And, of course, you could always just make your own original characters and your own imprint and all this, that, and the other. So there are ways to do it. But these were specifically like, if you still wanted to use these characters and these universes, kind of, then there are avenues to explore these things, and it's been done well. Like I said, these two in DC, like Superman Red Sun is really good. It's essentially, what if Superman had landed in the Soviet Union instead of Kansas, and so how the world would be different if he was a super commie. And it's really good. And the animated version of it's really good too. It changes the ending, and I don't like that. But there's some other changes I really do like in it. So, it's a mixed bag. I'll do a video on that sometime if I haven't already. And I just rewatched the animated movie recently, so. But so you have that, or you also have some of your characters are more grounded to begin with, and so like when they make the jump to the big screen, like with Batman, Well, the way Christopher Nolan played it was that Batman is like, it was like if Batman existed in a basically the real world or really close to it, as opposed to the Tim Burton movies where, well, it's clear that's a comic book universe, you know. So it'd be more difficult to tell some of the more serious stories in the Tim Burton movies than it would in the Christopher Nolan movies. So that's why the Christopher Nolan movies, you know, Joker goes from, you know, whatever you want to call him to basically, you know, a terrorist. And, you know, you focused more on like Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows, because their goals and some of their public appeals fall in line with real world things. So, you know, it's you're capable of doing that. Like a Mr. Freeze would stick out like a sore thumb in the Christopher Nolan movies. You know, Clayface, Poison Ivy, these people with these fantastic powers and abilities just wouldn't quite gel there. Whereas you would have to take Ra's al Ghul and like amp up certain other things to make him fit into the Tim Burton movies. To better fit in the Tim Burton movies. Or, you know, you do like poor Bane and just make him an idiot. Which, that was a terrible adaptation of Bane in Batman and Robin. Yeah, it's Batman and Robin, that's the fourth one. But, yeah, so you can see this even in the movies. And like the original X-Men movies tried to keep things grounded. And then the third one just, like, that's one of the reasons the third one just goes off the rails. Is because you've got, like, kind of grounded, the Dark Phoenix. Like, that does not work. I mean, the writing was terrible, and there's all kinds of other reasons that movie failed, but, like, is that sudden jarring shift. And so then whenever they kind of relaunched it with First Class, well, they start off, you know, somewhat fantastic. You know, you're seeing more fantastic mutants. They're using their powers a lot. You know, the government finds out about them, and, you know, the world knows about them, and there's more fantastic elements. So that when we get to the sequel, Days of Future Past, you're like, time travel? All right. Plus, it was a really good movie. So any kind of bumps from the time travel, you know, get smoothed over by the whole, like, this is a really good movie thing. So, you know, you've got things like that. And so that helped pave the way for the other installments in the franchise to engage in the more fantastic elements. So yeah, you know, that's why, like, with the MCU, you know, you start off with Iron Man. Iron Man seemed relatively grounded, but like the next movie was the Hulk, you know, and they try to kind of ground things, but then we get to Thor and Captain America with the Tesseract. You know, we're introduced to these fantastic elements. So by the time we get to Avengers, you know, an alien army pouring through a portal in the sky, created by a Norse god with an alien cube. Okay, makes sense. And then you just go more and more fantastic as you pass that point. And so, yeah, you know, that's kind of the reverse of what I'm talking about here, where you start off grounded and go the other way. And so, I guess my other point in all that is, you can introduce more realistic elements, and over time, kind of shift the way things are. Although for most things, it trends to go the other way. Like look at the Fast and Furious franchise. First movie, they're stealing DVD players on the highway. Part like 9, stopping a terrorist from getting a hold of a nuclear submarine with the nuclear missiles with intent to launch them onto targets with, you know, cars. Yeah. So anyway, that's my spiel here. Like, there are ways to do it specifically for comics. So anyway, that's most of what I got to say on this. I do have a part 4 planned. It's going to be a detour back to Star Wars, talking about kind of jarring differences in things and how it forces you to ask questions that there's no real good answer to. But we'll get to that eventually. Anyway, like I said, that's all I've got on here. So if you liked what you heard, you know, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. This is YouTube. You know how it all goes, presumably, hopefully. Commenting and sharing are the things that help us grow the channel. We always appreciate all of that. Subscribing, that's the name of the game. That's the metric of success. And thanks to you fine people, we surpassed 500 a little while ago. And thank you all for that. So, yeah, that is pretty much it. So I will be seeing you folks.